You know, sometimes the biggest breakthroughs in science aren't about finding something totally new, but about finally solving a really, really old mystery. Today, we're diving into a full-on mycological detective story, all about a common group of mushrooms that had scientists scratching their heads for centuries. Okay, take a look at this. This is Suillus pictus, also known as the painted bolete. It's a gorgeous mushroom, right? But for the longest time, it was part of a family that was so confusing, so tangled, that trying to figure out its relatives was pretty much impossible. This one fungus is the perfect way into our mystery. Chances are, you've probably walked right past Suillus mushrooms on a hike. I mean, they're everywhere, especially hanging out under pine trees. But their simple, everyday appearance was hiding this deep, chaotic secret. Scientifically speaking, nobody could agree on which mushroom was which. So, let's get right to the heart of it. Why was this so hard? Just how bad was the confusion, really? Well, let's just say that before 1964, trying to make sense of the Suillus genus was basically a recipe for a massive scientific headache. And hey, don't just take my word for it. In their huge 1964 paper, the very paper that solved the puzzle, the scientists themselves, Alexander Smith and Harry Thiers, called it this. I mean, you can just feel the sheer frustration in those words, can't you? This wasn't some minor academic disagreement. It was a genuine roadblock for the entire field. The problem was a total mess, and it had a bunch of layers. I mean, imagine trying to identify a suspect when every single description you have contradicts the last one. That's what mycologists were up against. The scientific literature was a disaster of conflicting reports. Then you had the dried specimens in museum collections. They often looked nothing like the fresh mushroom. They lose key features, change color, and to top it all off, you could have two totally different species pop up so close together they looked like they were one and the same. It was pure chaos. So how in the world do you solve a case like this? Well, you have to become a detective. Smith and Thiers realized they couldn't just rely on what these mushrooms looked like. They needed to gather a whole new kind of evidence, using clues that other people had either overlooked or just didn't think were important. They built their case using this amazing toolkit of 4 key clues. First up, the precise color of the spore deposit. Super important. Second, how the mushroom's flesh reacted when you dabbed it with certain chemicals. Third, of course, was a deep dive into its microscopic features. And fourth, and this was a brilliant piece of ecological detective work, was identifying the mushroom's secret underground partner. And that fourth clue, that brings us to this really cool concept called mycorrhiza. Basically, it's a partnership where a fungus connects to a tree's roots, and they help each other survive. Now, the key here is that Suillus species are super loyal. They stick with specific trees, especially conifers. So if you can identify the tree, you have a massive clue to the mushroom's identity. It's kind of like knowing a criminal's getaway driver. It narrows things down a lot. So, with all this forensic work, the spore prints, the chemical tests, the ecological profiling, it all led to this one huge breakthrough moment. In 1964, Smith and Thiers published a monograph, basically a giant book, that finally brought a clear, logical family tree to this incredibly troublesome group. And here it is. This is the hero of our story. I know, it doesn't look like much, but this document, a contribution toward a monograph of North American species of Suillus, was the key that unlocked the entire mystery. It was this monumental effort that pulled together decades of fieldwork and painstaking observation. This really shows you the human side of science, you know? It's not just about data. The monograph was dedicated to a fellow researcher, Albert W. Slip, acknowledging that he persevered against great odds. It's a reminder that this was the result of years of hard work, of collaboration, and just sheer stubborn persistence. And check out this timeline. It really puts what they did into perspective. We're not talking about a recent problem here. The confusion stretched back over 200 years, all the way to the very foundations of modern taxonomy with Carl Linnaeus. For 2 whole centuries, the puzzle just got more and more complex, until Smith and Thiers finally came along and provided the solution. So what was the single biggest change they made? Well, it was pretty radical for the time. For years, scientists had always treated 2 groups, Suillus and a related group called Buletinus, as totally separate families. Smith and Thiers looked at all the evidence and basically said, nope, that's a mistake. They moved a whole bunch of Buletinus species right into the Suillus genus, completely redrawing the boundaries of the entire family. So what was the smoking gun? The one piece of evidence that tied it all together? You might be surprised. It all came down to spore color. Smith and Thiers showed that the yellowish-brown spore deposits of the Bulletinus mushrooms fit perfectly within the known color range for the whole Suillus family. So even though the mushrooms looked really different on the outside, this one fundamental trait connected them. That was the big aha moment that justified reorganizing the whole thing. Okay, I get it. This all happened, 60 years ago? So you might be asking, why does this old mushroom book even matter today? Well, because its impact goes way, way beyond just tidying up a few names on a dusty old list. The legacy of this work is actually huge. First off, it completely redefined a major group of fungi, giving future researchers a reliable map to follow where before there was just chaos. It also hammered home the idea that you have to study organisms when they're fresh and alive to really get them. It's a perfect example of science being a process, always challenging old ideas to find a deeper truth. And by focusing on those tree partners, it helps shine a light on the hidden connections that literally hold our forest ecosystems together. And just look at this. This is the kind of complexity they managed to untangle. You can see the incredible diversity here, right? From species with these scaly, textured caps to others that are completely smooth and slimy. On the surface, they look like they should be in totally different families. But thanks to the incredible detective work of Smith and Thiers, we now understand the single, coherent story that connects them all. So the next time you're out for a walk in the woods and you see some ordinary-looking mushroom, remember the story of Suillus. It's just a great reminder that even the most common things around us can hold these incredibly complex histories. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? What other secrets about the natural world are just hiding in plain sight, waiting for their story to be told?